So we just think. So now, do the motivation in our own words, and we can sing the prayer. We're here together to listen to these words coming from the Buddha through the Tibetan lamas, these thousands of years, the experience of the holy beings. And the information we're going to describe is not coming from the sky. It's not made up. It's not speculation. It's direct experience. So we listen to it and listen to it as advice. You don't have to take it. As I say, we're not Buddha's not the boss. We are. But if you do decide to take it, even as 1%, then put your money where your mouth is. Put it into practice. That's the idea of it. Not just to like it and think it's nice, but to see if it's useful. And what's the advice for? Well, to help develop our marvelous potential. And then on the basis of this, we can help others because we're all in the same boat. Something like that. And of course, the most altruistic reason to be together, to your goal, motivation, is to listen to this from the long-term perspective, so we can finally become a Buddha, fully developed. That's what Buddha has found is possible. Everyone's got that potential, the natural state of our being. Then we are able to benefit countless beings. That's the idea. Like that. Prayer then? Where's the prayer, please? Who's in the charge here? Okay, darling. Refuge prayer, refuge and bodhicitta. Thank you. So that's the second two lines. And the first two lines are just reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. Like that. Sangye charam soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki jola penche sangye drupashok. Sangye charam soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki jola penche sangye drupashok. Sangye charam soke chognam la Jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chanyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupasho. Freedom through understanding sounds very grand, doesn't it? This is really the exact point, the Buddha's making, which is unusual. I mean, first of all, freedom, we're not sure we want that. We know we want happiness. That makes sense. But freedom, we're not a bit vague. But what he means by that is freedom from suffering, Freedom from suffering. Flip that over and it means happiness. So understanding, why is that? What's that got to do with anything? What's that got to do with happiness? That's curious. Understanding, wisdom. And that's Buddha's point. That's the essential point he's making. The fundamental point. And understanding this, then we understand what practice means. If we don't, then it's just confusing. Basically, what Buddha's saying is, in our mind, we have various states of mind that are valid, that are reasonable, that are appropriate. That means a valid state of mind is one that's in sync with the thing it's describing. It's in sync with what's there, But then there are some states of mind, and this is the problem, that are not. They're not valid because they're not in sync with what's existing. There's a disconnect. In other words, that's the problem. That is a central problem, he's saying. We have layers upon layers upon layers of misconceptions in our mind that we totally believe is the truth because we've been believing them for eons, he says. That's why it's so hard to identify them. And then as Rinpoche says, as Amitabha says, that they are there and then they kind of misrepresent the world back to us. But these misconceptions have been there for so long, so many countless lifetimes. The tragedy is, first, we don't even think we have misconceptions. We have no idea. It's a weird idea to us. And then second, because they're so ancient and deeply ingrained in us, the presence of them in our mind cause things out there to appear wrongly to us. They cause what's out there, as Rinpoche says, to appear back to us wrongly. So it's like you've believed for so long that a $50 note is 500. When you see it, you actually see 500. You see 500. You don't go, it's really only 50, I forgot. No. It looks like 500 because you believe for so long. So these misconceptions, and what Buddha is saying is identified these in the mind. And this is where you've got to understand where he comes from, because it doesn't fit with the modern world. It doesn't fit with neuroscience, not at all. You know, there's some semblance of some kind of equivalence somewhere. People are finding that. But until we understand what he means by this and where this information comes from, how come he can see the mind so clearly that he can see this is because of these genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago, as Dalai Lama says. They're the ones who began the investigation to nature itself, and they're the ones who created this genius technique called the accomplishment of samadhi. In other words, they literally discovered these subtler levels of mind beyond the brain. Of course, as soon as we hear that, we think it's, hippy trippy spiritual, therefore just made up stuff. And he's not talking about some weird thing called a soul or a spirit. No such thing. We have a mind. And his view of the mind, his observation of what the mind is, that's what's so genius about him. And it comes from these Indians. It didn't just come from him. He went through this incredible system first, went as far as he could go, and found that they haven't. What he's saying is we can remove these misconceptions, but what he found was the Indians before him, these genius yogis and scholars, hadn't removed enough. There's still misconceptions still there. Yeah. That's the point. That's what he means by wisdom. That's what he means by understanding wisdom. Getting our mind to the point where it's in sync with what exists. When you study Buddhist, when you study the philosophical teachings, which are the source of the Lam Rim, the very first text you study in the monasteries, Dura, collected topics. This is what's interesting. Over the years, when we were sharing with this body, with our master's program and basic program, all the Geshis are so confused why he never gets us to study this text. Have you heard about this, Jeff? Has anybody ever discussion about there's this text called Dura. The very first thing you study in the monastery is called collected topics. The Rinpoche refuses, whatever reason, he never includes it in the study programs. So the Geshis have to sneak it in around the corner, because it's the first thing you study, and everybody's really confused why it's never said, and never done, and never taught. So it's really good to look into that, because Rinpoche, for whatever reason, he's never included in the masters or the basics. When Lama started the Geshe program, when I was there in England in the late 70s, he followed the system, And the very first text we studied was called Dura, collected topics. But the Geshe's always puzzled why. Maybe we should ask Ken Rinpoche, maybe ask Ken Rinpoche, or ask Geshe and Neshe Namdak, all the modern Geshis, and see if they've ever had this discussion with Rinpoche. Because he just never gives an answer. It's very curious. I mean, I'm not being rude. It's interesting though. Huh? I can't hear you. Yeah. Oh no, him for sure, but also Ken Rinpoche and Topa, just to see what they say. I mean, there must be discussions. Anyway, in that text, what I'm getting at is it's one of the few texts that I studied. In that text, you basically learn kind of like this sort of like there's this map. What do you call it when you have a family tree? It's like a family tree. It's not a family tree, but it's a structure. You learn the nuts and bolts of all the terminology, phenomena, impermanent, permanent, and then down to mind, how many divisions, this and that. So it's the nuts and bolts of Buddha's worldview. And in the very first one, you learn that there are things that exist. The first heading, the very top heading, is existent, and there are several synonyms: phenomenon, object of knowledge, established base, object, and phenomenon. There's 5. It's existent, and those are. But they call it the first one. I think they call it existent. So what you think? Well, why is he telling us about that which exists? Why is that interesting? Because it's his view, what exists in the universe. So the definition, there are all sorts of different definitions, but they all refer to the same thing, they're all synonyms. But the definition of an existent is that which can be cognized by mind. And it has to be a valid cognition. So in other words, in Buddhism, it's axiomatic that which is cognized by mind is that which exists. So this is where the centrality of mind in Buddhism is really mind-blowing. This is not in modern science. I mean, psychology and all these things are the lowest on the totem pole, I think, in our sciences, because it's just too wishy-washy, Neuroscience, yeah, because it's hard, it's the brain, right? But this is the mind for the Buddha. This is internal, Nothing to do with the outside world. It's internal, not physical. Doesn't come from a creator. Doesn't come from mummy and daddy. And it's got the grosser level, sensory, and it's got the kind of subtle level, which is mental, where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions are. That's where the workshop is, as Rinpoche says. And then you've got this subtle level, which we only ever access once you've got single point of concentration. And you have to get that finally in order to get samadhi, in order to develop this, to access the subtle level of your mind, so you can really begin to unpack and unravel the nonsense and get to identify all the delusions, the misconceptions, and remove them, and thus develop the wisdom of a Buddha's mind combined with bodhicitta. You now have wisdom that sees things as they are, sees reality, sees existence as it is. And so this is how he talks. It's not just a relative thing, well, it's my view of existence. I think it's this and you think it's that. He's talking about it, reality, actual reality. He didn't make it up, he's observed it. That's the interesting point. He's observed it. So he's saying that at the moment, the delusions in our mind, in our mental consciousness, this is why the Buddhist model of mind is so important to understand. You've got the neurotic, deluded misconceptions. You have the valid, virtuous states of mind. Then you have the third lot. They kind of broadly say are neutral or neither negative nor positive, but I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. They're states of mind that are neither neurotic nor virtuous, but they're utterly necessary. Concentration, intention, discrimination, attention, many of these, that mindfulness, people romanticize a lot. That's just the capacity to remember what you're doing moment by moment. All of these work together. These are crucial states of mind, working together with the virtues and non-virtues to make you a murderer or a meditator. A meditator needs concentration. A murderer needs concentration. Thieves need mindfulness, as Rinpoche says, So this crucial way of describing the mind, which is unique to the Buddha. No other view has it. It's unique to the Buddha. We know the words, love, compassion, anger, jealousy, concentration, but we don't have this model. But it's absolutely crucial if you want to understand Buddhism and want to understand how to stop suffering. You've got to understand this. Study these texts. Low readers, the one about the mind. That will describe that, So when you study these terms, that which exists is an incredibly powerful concept. Never would have thought in the whole world, who would ever have thought we suffer because we don't have wisdom? We suffer because we have misconceptions. It's too weird, This is Buddha's view. So we can liberate ourselves, free ourselves from suffering by removing the delusions from the mind. That's the essential point he's making. The mind is the creator, literally, of everything that exists in the universe. And we will never understand until we understand what he means by the mind. So freedom from suffering through getting wisdom. Big surprise. I think that's the cause of happiness, but that's his point. That's his entire point. I think it's a really important point to understand the distinction. How we talk about wisdom in our culture. We admire great musicians and great physicists, and these people with wisdom, clever people, intelligent people. We love that. But it's really true, isn't it? It's really true. You can be the best physicist on the planet. I always joke and say it, but it's true. You can be the best physicist on the planet, but you'd still go home and beat up your children and your husband. Because it's got zero to do with ethics. And this is why the Buddha's view, you can't separate ethics from wisdom. Because we have lack of wisdom because of lack of ethics, which comes from the misconceptions in the mind. So ethics is fundamental. That's why it's a starting point in the Buddhist practice. Ethics, control the body and speech, control the servants of the mind. So bad ethics is actions you do with your body and speech, driven by misconceptions. So living in ethics is the first step. Calm the servants of your mind down. Control your body and speech. Live in vows. You can't possibly get ahead without this. Being good is not enough, as Ramazapa says. You've got to live in vows. Vows are tremendously powerful psychologically, that enable you to control your body and speech. Then that enables you to look at your mind and start practicing and identify, distinguishing between the neuroses and the virtues. That's the Buddhist approach to life. That's how you get wisdom, and that's how you get happiness. That's it. Then you add bodhicitta to the mix, of course, if you're on the Mahayana path. So, you know, the final wisdom, of course, is you get it in the six perfections. The last two perfections of the Bodhisattva, the sixth of the six perfections is where you finally, it's described, it's called wisdom. You know, special insight into emptiness. That's wisdom. That's the final wisdom. But that doesn't mean the rest of the path has not got to do with wisdom. All the rest of the path is developing wisdom, but one step at a time. You know, the very first scope, based on living in good ethics, you learn about karma. That's Buddha's view about how things exist. They say the Bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us because we don't understand karma. We don't realize the reality of cause and effect, that it's the law that runs our world, runs our lives, and runs our mind, and that we're the main cause of our suffering and happiness. That's a most profound wisdom to get. So wisdom into how karma works, the way the mind is driven by past actions, and then and learning to know about cause and effect. This is absolutely powerful wisdom. That the ignorance of that is one of the major causes of our suffering. And then you get to the second scope and you get about the mind. You learn about the mind. And here, this is massive. We think our mind's the brain, not being rude. You know, we think, I mean, the modern world, that's it. We don't posit anything else. There is a brain and that's it. It's not being rude. It's a fact. Buddha says it's profoundly limited view. There were philosophical materialists around at the time of the Buddha. Their arguments are all there too, and Buddha's views are arguing with them as well. So as that we invented this idea, set of scientists, starting with Galileo, you know, starting to argue with the Christians. That's a huge ignorance for the Buddha. You're profoundly limited. You can never get happy. You never understand the mind until you understand that it's not physical. He's not being fundamental. He's not trying to shove his findings down our throat. He's telling you what he's found to be true. It's up to us to look into it. You have to believe him. It's all there. All the information's there. All the knowledge is in the text. All the knowledge in this vast body of knowledge from centuries ago. These amazing genius yogis and scholars tracking back to the Indians. It's all there for us to look into if we want to. Instead of believing or anything. So then the ignorance about how the mind works. This is tremendous ignorance from the Buddha's view. The ignorance that both karma and the mind, that when we believe the main cause of suffering and happiness are out there. This is the worst ignorance you can imagine. This is the grossest ignorance. We'll never get happy. We'll never be free from suffering thinking that. That's absolutely what we believe. We believe it's an absolute truth. It's the truth of what science teaches us. With respect to us. That's ignorance. It's not wisdom. I mean, look how we suffer every day. We think the people who harm us are the main cause of our suffering. We think the people who are kind to us are the main cause of our happiness. We blame the boyfriend for making us happy. We blame the cake for making us happy. We think it's the main cause. Of course we do. Attachment presents an attachment. I mean, the grosser delusions, the branch delusions, which we learned about in the middle scope. Forget the subtle delusion, forget the root one, ego grasping. We don't get to that until we get to the great scope, you know, and we get to the last perfection, emptiness. That's when we learn about the root delusion. But in the middle scope, we learn about the branch delusions, the emotional afflictions, the emotional delusions, you know. So in karma, we learn about the delusional, the misconception that there's no cause and effect. The mind is not physical, all of these things. And then we learn the contents of the mind. And when we're learning the way that the branch delusions function, attachment being the main one. I mean, the Four Noble Truths, Lord Buddha basically says it's the main cause of our suffering in the world. The root delusion, of course, but the main cause where we experience the world, and that's why Buddha says we live in a desire realm. We live in a realm of attachment, created over countless lifetimes. Our world, our body itself, is created by our attachment over centuries and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of rebirths. You know, who we are, the body, the way the shape it takes, the way the world in front of us, the shape it takes and how it impacts upon us. All of this is coming from the mind, virtues and delusions. When happy things happen, that's the fruit of virtue. When unhappy things happen, it's the fruit of attachment and aversion. But even the good things are the fruit of attachment as well, because we haven't realized emptiness. You know, in Buddha's view, it's amazing. If you don't study it, you can't get free. I promise. So not being in touch with reality. Forget the emptiness, the final reality, this conventional reality. So you could argue the entire Lam Rim from karma all the way up to the fifth of the six perfections, all the way to the fifth of the six perfections, all through the lower scope, all about karma, refuge, then next scope, the mind, how it functions and suffering, and the next scope, bodhicitta. All of that's conventional reality. If we can get in touch with conventional reality, we'd already be pretty happy. We'd be pretty amazing, you know. That's getting us organized with conventional reality, conventional truth. The world would be an amazing place if we could even be in touch with conventional truth. Karma is conventional truth. The mind and delusions and how the mind works, not physical, blah, blah. That's conventional truth. Bodhicitta, that's conventional truth. Now we're ready for ultimate truth, the sixth perfection. Now our mind is ready, ripe and ready. We're now in touch with conventional reality. I mean, look at the world, you know. I mean, even simply speaking, the grossest level of misconceptions in the world. Look at all conspiracy theories and these millions of websites and people and all the social media and the people just vomiting their views about how things exist to the whole world. We believe anything anyone tells us. There's utter confusion in the world, utter just maniacs, you know, deluded minds making things up every second. It's very hard to see what is real and what is not. Conventionally, you get ultimate. Zero wisdom. There's delusions, misconceptions. So the misconceptions, more broadly, if you look at the Buddhist view, you've got the emotional afflictions, and they're the ones that they talk about in the middle scope. You know, but you've got all the other viewpoints. Karma is a viewpoint, okay? Okay, let's look at how the mind works. We've discussed this. I've said it many times. Excuse me. Santa Fe, so I've got my snotty nose again. So sorry, my allergies. As soon as I get to Santa Fe. I've got some nettles, Anna. She told me to get some nettle tea. I've just ordered nettle tea. What? Well, I mean, what do you think if I've got a snotty nose? What do you think, Lou? Come to your own conclusion. I won't help much because it all just, excuse me, thank you. I'll bet take two. Anyway, you know, oh yeah, there's, you know, we've got the emotional affections, and they're what we deal with in the middle scope. But then we've got all the other misconceptions that haven't got the emotional component. They're the philosophical views, basically, about how things exist. Well, karma's one of those, you know. It's a philosophical view. It's a viewpoint. So let's look at that and what that means. You know, like I said, when you study the Buddhist view, when you study Lorig, one of the things you study is the epistemological model, which is incredibly extensive and utterly mind-blowingly fascinating. The way the mind works, and this is coming directly from the experience of these great yogis in their own mind, not with a microscope on the brain, with a microscope on your own internal subjective process itself. And it's incredible how it works. Well, one of the simple ways in the epistemological model of distinction, we've got two ways the mind knows things, two ways the mind cognizes. One is sensory consciousness and one is mental. I bring this up a lot of times. This is crucial to understand it. So we make the body the boss, as Swami Yeshi says. There's no doubt about that. I mean, our body, our sensory, our physical body and our sensory consciousnesses, which are connected to the body. The eye consciousness is not the eyeball. The eye consciousness is that part of your mind that functions through the medium of the eyeball. The ear consciousness is the part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium, all the bits and pieces working. So you've got your sensory consciousness that functions through the medium of this gross bag of bones, right? That's the grossest level of our mind, of our cognition. Well, we give incredible power to the body, as Lama says. You know, so always the same example I use. I'll see this nice cup. I'll go, that's a nice looking thermos. I would say that. That's why I bought it. And I'll never buy anything I didn't like, I promise you. Which, if you give me one, I'd accept it. You understand? Thank you very much. I'd say it's so nice. Do you like it to be? Oh, yes, I'd say. Anyway, that one, I'd say it's a nicely designed thermos. But of course, as I always say, we think my eye consciousness, my eyeballs are seeing a nicely. No. Sensory consciousness are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. eye consciousness is only capable of cognizing shape and color. Ear is only, can only cognize mere sound. So then you've got to ask the question, which part of my mind is cognizing a nicely designed thermos? Well, that's your mental consciousness. As Robina says, that's where the workshop is. And so I really mean this, quicker than Google, the millisecond my eyes go there, I will then come out of my mouth will be what will be a thought, a concept, words. Oh, what a nicely designed thermos. That's a thought, isn't it? Words are just expressions of thoughts. And what are thoughts? Concepts, viewpoints, opinions, ideas. So our head is full of opinions and ideas, isn't it? And of course, we all believe that whatever's in my head must be true. We all know that. We all think that. We all believe that. All the wacky conspiracy theories, every one of us. When we believe you did this to me and I believe that did that to me. We don't ever think it's a viewpoint. We never think it's a viewpoint. We don't think it's a viewpoint. It's a viewpoint. Now, some are valid and some are not. 1 + 1 is 2 is a valid viewpoint. Based on what? Not from the sky, not from absolute truth. There's a relative truth based upon the body of knowledge called mathematics. It's relative reality. And we can prove it. So everything in the head that's now getting us to the mental conscious, the other way our mind functions. And then mental conscious has 2 levels of functioning. The grosser level, the only level we function at, is conceptuality, thoughts, concepts, thoughts. Now that's a big surprise to us. We say concepts are here, and then we go feelings, a special area called feelings here, right? So that's what Buddha deals with in the middle scope. The emotion, we call the emotion. They don't have a word like that. So they're divided into two divisions. 3, negative, positive, and then the third lot. They're not emotional. Negative and positive are the emotional ones up there. Attachment, the 3 poisons, attachment, anger, rooted in ignorance, the root delusion. These 3. The others, as Ling Rinpoche says when he goes around, the young Ling Rinpoche, he says, as we all know, Buddha talks about 84,000 problems, afflictions, 84,000 misconceptions. And then in all his teachings are the answers, are the 84,000 answers to all of those. I remember always asking the Geshes what text I'll find that list of 84,000. They say you won't find it. I'm sure it must be there somewhere. Maybe you have to make your own. But anyway, the point about the 84,000, as Ling Rinpoche says, 21,000 are rooted in attachment. 21,000 have the character of attachment. 21,000 are rooted in and have a character of aversion or anger, aversion. And then 1,000 have a character of ignorance, the root delusion, or ignorance in general, and specifically the root delusion. And the fourth 21,000 have a character of all 4. So it's a very coherent kind of map of the mind. And we're not talking the brain, we're talking the subjective cognitive process itself. And this is mental consciousness, not sensory, mental. So because our body is so dominating us, and because the sensory experiences that function through the body are so dominant, they are entry into the world, aren't they? Entry into everything through the senses. But look at it right there. That just proves to us how we are delusional. I will say that's a well-designed cup, and I believe and this is the point, I believe well-designed cupness is in the cup itself. And you say it's not, I just think you're stupid. So I see it as truth. But my eyes can't even see that. It's my concepts. Based on my attachment, my viewpoints. The second I see that, I access my mind. And Buddha says everything we've ever seen, tasted, touched, heard, and smelt since beginningless time is stored in our mind, is in our memory. That's pretty mind-boggling. So I pluck it out based on my taste this life and whatever, and indeed last life as well. That's a nicely designed thermos, I think. Now, there could be some validity to it, like I said, like I joke and I say there could be a competition of best designed thermoses, and that could have won the prize. There might be some set of rules about how you define, like math. It could be that way. But it's a conventional, and it's a conventional thing, and it's a concept. It's in the mental consciousness, and that's what appears to us. Yeah, we can say shape and color, but what appears to us, based on the viewpoints in our mind, is that very thing. And we think that very thing isn't got anything to do with my mind. It comes from the thing. This is the final one. And even attachment, all of the delusions are like this. And the virtues as well. I mean, a person's got a virtuous state of mind, peaceful and kind and loving. The world appears to them very different than a person who's angry. It's obvious, it's so clear, it's sort of evident what Buddha's saying. We don't join the dots, you know. But they're opinions. It's what we've got to do. The job that we have to learn to do in this workshop is sort out the chaos in here and start working out what's in there. What are all these thousands of concepts? And some of them are not valid and have to be rid of. Some are valid, which means they're real, they exist conventionally. And then and all that's in this. So that means learning about karma, not just the emotional ones, learning about karma. That's a bunch of very elaborate presented viewpoints about reality. Where does it come from? Not the sky, not from revelation, but from Buddha's observation. How does he know about the mind? From his observation. He's a scientist. Stop joking. Not joking. Something being clever. You know, it's a fact. If you can prove Buddha's wrong, then you must reject him. Of course you must. So we live at the conceptual level. We live at a conventional level of conceptuality. Opinions and viewpoints about things. So they're necessarily disconnected, you know. Eventually, with single point of concentration, this is the second level of the way the mental conscious functions. Once you've got samadhi, subtle concentration, you've gone beyond the gross conceptuality. You've gone beyond the sensory. Now you can use your mind in the most amazingly sophisticated way, even at a level of subtle conceptuality, to unpack and unravel the nonsense. And then eventually you get direct perception, non-conceptual direct perception into the ultimate reality, based upon learning first the conventional. You have to first establish the conventional. You have to first establish what exists conventionally. Then you can find the ultimate reality of that conventional reality. This is where we get to emptiness. This is the final wisdom. First, you've got to get conventional wisdom first. If you think 1 + 1 is, if you think that's pink, you'll never understand ultimate reality until the cows come home. You've got to first recognize it's called black. That's a conventional truth. Now you can get to the emptiness after that. So you've got to sort out the mind first at the grosser level. Get at least our mind full of valid concepts. So valid concepts would mean karma. Valid concepts would mean a description of what the mind is and how it functions and all its contents. Then the emotional ones, getting rid of the attachment. You can still say that's a black thermos, but still get it wrong because you're totally attached to it. So you see it through the lens of attachment, so it appears more delicious than it really is. You can say it's a black thermos, fact. But attachment makes it all shiny and delicious. That's a lie. You know, so first, if you think it's a pink thermos, you're in double trouble. First, get the facts clear. It's a black thermos. Then you remove the attachment from it, and now you see relatively the black thermos. Now, the virtues, they're valid concepts. They are valid. There's a reality there, conventional. But still, I can have compassion, you know, incredible compassion. You can be a bodhisattva with insane compassion, but you haven't realized emptiness yet. So still there's a misconception there. In other words, even though the bodhisattva knows those words, still there's the inherent I having inherent compassion for inherent you. Haven't realized emptiness yet. But there's a valid concept there. The virtues are valid concepts. You've removed attachment, removed anger, removed neuroses and delusions, which are the double trouble ones, the garbage dump ones. You know? So not only do we have nonsense conspiracy theories about there being things that don't exist at all, but then we have the delusions that decorate on top of that a bunch of rubbish. So it's like triple levels and levels of nonsense. So gradually, through the whole Ram room, you're removing gradually layer upon layers of misconceptions. And then by the time you've got bodhicitta, your honey child, you're ready. Emptiness will come. Finally, you see there's no I from its own side, no bodhicitta from its own side, no black thermos from its own side. You just take these two and you're cooked. You're a Buddha. Wisdom. How delicious. You should be hungry for it. It's the method to get happy. Okay, what do you think, people? Ask me some questions. Ask me some questions, anybody, somebody. Any questions? Any questions? Yeah. Go, sweetheart. It's a really good point. So give me an example. Give me an example. Give me an example of a delusion, as I say, in a certain scenario. Tell me, what do you mean? Okay, someone's being mean to somebody. Somebody's being ugly to somebody. Someone punches someone in the nose. So then, go on. The question. Yeah, go on then. You might want. Go on. Right, exactly. So then, yeah, good. Yeah. So then, go on. Oh, totally. Of course you do. But, the source of it, I mean, I'm being a bit cliched here. The source of it in our culture is you've got to find out when did you, sort of, we want to go find where did I first start getting angry? So we go back to when I was 2.5 and daddy must have punched me in the nose or something. I'm being a bit sarcastic here. So we think, oh, that's the source of my anger. But no, it's not like that. Honey, the answer is so embarrassingly simple, we're going to blush. Anger, its source is attachment. Attachment is effectively the main cause of our suffering in day-to-day life. It's there all the time. And it's this emotional hunger, this demented emotional hunger that only wants everything to be nice, can only cope with everything being nice. It's like a fragile child in us that's desperate to get everything nice every second. So, of course, when you see someone punch someone else, you've got compassion, which is a virtuous state of mind, and your compassion feels the pain of that person. That's a valid concept. But the anger one, how dare they do that? That's not fair. This is very naughty. That's because you have attachment, but also because you have the misconception of no karma, and because of the misconception of ignorance, root ignorance. So this, all the root of it is in the mind. They're all connected to each other. Anger, roughly speaking, anger, which is the response when my attachment, which is this little junkie that only wants everything to be lovely, doesn't get it. And then the whole philosophy of anger, let me analyze it. What's the philosophy? What anger says? Anger's saying, how dare he do that? Would you agree with that? That's what anger's saying. Would you agree with that? Now that not so the anger itself is the response to attack, like a shock, How dare that happen? But the actual philosophy of anger, is saying, how dare he do that to her? Or how dare you do that to me? That's the real energy of anger. So the misconception there is because we have no understanding of karma and the causes of why it's happening. Are you hearing me? So if you have a view of karma and you try to practice it every day, you're not clairvoyant yet, so you can't see the truth of it, but you live according to it, then you know why someone is punching someone else. Because they are both in this scenario together. They bumped into each other again for 42 lifetimes. I mean, this is a big deal. We can't cope with this in the West, It's too much for our minds. And so they meet each other again, and even almost before they know it, this thing's happening. So if you have a view of karma yourself, you learn to know why that's happening. And then, of course, you can very kindly go in there and intervene and try and help the person and stop them from being harmed. That's called compassion. But the delusion, this is a Buddha's deal, Buddha's point. It's a misconception, quite literally. First, it's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. It's like a panic attack, An attachment is this misconception that it's coming from the root delusion called ego grasping. It somehow feels I'm just this half of a little kind of bereft person, set in stone, miserable and lonely and bereft and ugly and hopeless. That's the energy of ego grasping. Then attachment, its main voice that hungrily wants something more because we never feel we're enough. And then anger is a response when it has a panic attack when an attachment doesn't get what it wants. We can see these three alone just in our day-to-day workings. And then look at the karmic one. Because attachment is this hubris, this sense of enormous entitlement that I deserve happiness, which implies you think someone out there is supposed to give it to you. You understand? If you don't look at your garden and go, how come there are no flowers in my garden? I deserve flowers. You wouldn't say that because you know you own the garden and what's in it, you put there, baby, and you own responsibility. And that shows how demented we are. Nobody has a view of cause and effect. And that's why they say the bodhisattva has the greatest compassion for us, because we all have this assumption of a concrete I that didn't ask to get born, who's an innocent victim, who someone else had a conspiracy theory called God or mummy and daddy or whoever, and they made me and plopped me on this planet, and we live in fear of the bad things coming. How dare bad things happen? I don't deserve them. And how dare good things don't happen because I do deserve them. These are layers and layers of misconceptions in our mind, which inform the way we experience our suffering. They're all misconceptions.
Yes, very, very good. So much, Venerable. That appreciate it very much.
Give Karen the microphone, please. Yes, sweetheart. Meanwhile, you want to be a political activist, get out there and help the world. Do as what Martin Luther King said. When you see suffering, you go, he says, it's good to see injustice, it's good to see racism. But then you say, what can I do to help? Not just shout, yell, scream, how dare, you know? You understand me? That's called compassion. That's great.
I think you just answered my question.
I knew that. I anticipated it. I knew it was coming. That's why I jumped in quickly and answered your question before you asked it.
Because I was going to say, when I was 22 and I saw what was happening in Mississippi to Black people, I went there. First, I was angry, but then But I wanted to ask you, when you started the prison project, were you angry at what was happening in the prisons?
No, that's the point. No, I mean, I'd done my political work before that, back at the same time as you. I don't know how old you are. I forget how old you are. But maybe back in the, like my first political activity was in London. I was a hippie first in London. I was left home when I was about 22 years in London. Gave up wanting to be in Tennessee. I started being an activist, you know. My first main activity was I was working in London. We started a group called the Friends of Solidarity. George Jackson and the Solidarity Brothers, 1971. So supporting all the Black Panthers and all that stuff. You know? That was my first one. So that was when I had the anger. That was exactly my philosophy there. I was very noble. I wanted to make the world a better place. I could see suffering and injustice and poverty and racism. Absolutely, for sure. I did. But by the time I went through, I sort of joke and say I looked through, first of all, I was a Catholic and blamed all the non-Catholics for the suffering of the world. And then I was a hippie and blamed all the straight people. And then I became a radical lefty and blamed all the rich people. Then I got involved in kind of the imperialist business and race and blamed all the white people. And then I became a feminist and blamed all the male people. And sort of by that point, I'd exhausted all options. I mean, I went through it very quickly because I'm a bit speedy. Yeah. You understand, I've got about 10 years of activity, and I literally had exhausted all options, Karen, for who the hell to blame for the suffering. And then I was doing martial arts, which I really liked. It suited my nature. And then a kind gentleman called Bill Bright ran over my foot and broke my 5th metatarsal. And as I fell on the ground, I had a panic. I can't do my karate. I was devastated. And then I saw a poster, and it said Lama Yeshe. And that's when and even today, I convinced I'd known his name before, but then I went to this course and then they told me that I should start looking at my mind, which I hadn't done before. And here I am 50 years later still doing it. So I was not angry, no, not in the slightest extent. I'd done all that work before, luckily. Do you understand me?
Yes, yes.
I had, because the view of karma when I first heard it, for me, that was what was missing in my life. I was about 31 when I first heard the Dharma. And I was ready for it. And karma was the most delicious thing I'd heard. I loved the view of karma. I didn't have any problem with it. I thought that was been missing in my life. So for me, that's been informed. And even the one for me, because I was this really radical feminist at that time. When I first was doing the radical politics, the black stuff, I heard, it was in the early 70s, I heard this thing called, I thought it was called femininism. I didn't know the word. Then I've heard about, radical fem. I thought I like radical. And then of course I had to keep going because I'm radical. Then I gave up the boys and became a radical lesbian feminist. And then I did even more, and I gave up even looking at a boy, and I became a radical lesbian separatist feminist, Karen. You know, I mean, I lived on a place. We lived in Australia. This friend of mine, she had a place we called it Amazon Acres. She bought some land, and even if you were 6 years old with a thing between your legs, you could not come. I'm sorry. Serious, you know. So I always went to.
We have that here, by the way.
There you go. So I went to the outer edge of all these views, you know. So then when I finally bumped into the lamas, it was shocking to me because even when I did a first 1 month Lama in the course of Lama Zopa, and then Lama Yeshe was there, and he was one who hooked me. I love Lama Yeshe, but I remember I did a Chenrezig course a wonderful teaching by Lama's Yeshe, 1 month of Chenrezig teaching. And I remember I wanted to do because I like Lama, but I found it too difficult to visualize Chenrezig as male. So I visualized him as female. I did all the visualizations.
Green Tara.
Difficult one. But for me, the view of karma, I realized with the view of karma, my mind not being physical, countless lifetimes. I've been a male countless times, a female, a dog, everything. So, and then I realized that what it meant was that my actual nature isn't male or female or any of those things. Your actual nature is your consciousness, and its final truth is it's enlightened energy, you know. So it's virtue and goodness. So that was very necessary for me to hear about karma. So by the time I got to the Prism Project, that was 20 years later, nothing to do with anything, nothing at all. But I mean, it was, I could see the view of wisdom, which I really found appealing, informed my wish to be of benefit because you could see the suffering. That was enough. But I didn't go on about karma to all of them. I mean, depending on who they were, you don't go on about karma, but you see people that are suffering, you know, so you help people according to their level. It wasn't about suffering. It wasn't about, but it was outrageous. I mean, don't get me on the American prison system. It's beyond bearing, you know. It's getting worse.
But I guess part of my question, okay, so I had two. When you say look at karma, okay, the guy who's punching his 4-year-old daughter, is that her karma?
Okay, the view of karma, Karen, is so simple to present, but very hard for our mind because it's nothing to do with how we see the world. The Buddha's view is very simple. That there are trillions of consciousnesses, mind possessors, sentient beings, humans, animals, dogs, all kinds we can't see, spirits, hell beings, God beings, trillions of sentient beings. Our minds are beginningless, and every millisecond of what we think and do and say is basically the process that produces the person we become. The Dalai Lama says it's like self-creation. So every millisecond of any negative thought or action we do programs our mind and sows seeds in our mind and will ripen in the future as my suffering, necessarily. And every single second of any action I do that's virtuous and positive will only ripen as my happiness. That's it. So we look at the world, we see suffering. Well, it's the fruit of their past negativity. We look at the world and we see happiness. It's the fruit of my virtue. That's the bottom line. It's not a complicated presentation, but it's kind of so shocking we can't hear it.
So the little girl who's getting punched, the little girl who's getting punched.
Yeah.
In her past life.
No question. But also the little girl, Karen, the little girl who has a lovely mummy and a lovely daddy and money in the bank and has got good teachers and never gets harmed, she also created that. We only tend to ask her when it's the bad things because we can't cope with hearing about bad things. But karma refers to any second in your life that anyone has done anything good to you, all your virtues. If we understood this, that would be blissful for us. In other words, the flowers and the weeds come from seeds we planted. We somehow only get upset about the negative ones. You know? Understand?
Yes.
So it's a big deal that when we think about it, and see, the trouble is also we hear it because we're so used to the creator model of religion that there's a punisher and a rewarder, and that's how we hear karma. But Buddha is not a creator. He doesn't posit, he thinks creator is a dumb idea. He does not have a view like that. So there's no concept of a creator. There's no concept of punishment and reward. But that's how we hear it. But it's not like that. We hear it that way, but it's not like that.
So even though this little girl had the karma from her past life to get
could be 57
to get hit,
get harmed,
we still watching it would still want to intervene.
But of course, the very reason that you want to help somebody and try and stop the suffering is because you have compassion for them. You have compassion because we're arrogant. You have compassion because we're angry, and you have compassion because we realize that we don't know that we caused it. This is the worst suffering. We think it's everyone else doing it to me. I feel like an innocent victim. That's the worst aspect of ego, Buddha says. And that's self-pity and outrage and how dare. So in other words, you don't need to have we only have compassion for innocent victims, isn't it? But when we have this view, you have compassion for everybody, but compassion is not some sentimental yucky thing. It's informed by very powerful wisdom. And so in other words, nobody has compassion. I always think no one has compassion for a pedophile, but that pedophile has a mum and she has compassion for him. You know why? Because she can see he's harming himself. And that's the view about karma. Do you understand? A friend of mine, Andre, in North Carolina, when we did a conference years ago in San Francisco, and it was about restorative justice. So talking, which is such a good method, talking to the victims and the victim and the oppressor meeting, you know. And anyway, this woman whose daughter had been, she happened to be white, her daughter had been raped and murdered in prison. Raped and murdered. And then Andre, who happens to be black, and I worked with him in the prison project, he worked with young guys in prison, and his son had been murdered in a bar. And he was asked on the television that night, how do you feel about the murderer of your son? And he's a Buddhist, right? And he straight away he was in tears, and he said, how can I not have compassion for him? His suffering is just beginning. He could see that immediately, this boy. These two boys in the same boat, one gets murdered and one is the murderer, you know, and he was able to have compassion. He's not discussing karma, but he can see his suffering is only just beginning, he said. That's hard for our minds. Yeah. We want to have an innocent victim and a monster. Then we're prepared to have compassion. Do you understand?
I do.
Yeah. That's why, I mean, Martin Luther King was such a wonderful way to say it. He said it's good to be angry. He meant it's good to find fault. There is racism. There is just injustice. We don't go on about it. What can I do to help? That's compassion. That's amazing. And you can see how amazing he was. He kept his clarity. He never got out of control. He never gave up. He never gave up, you know. At the time, I remember thinking I didn't like him much. I preferred Malcolm X. But actually, I look at Martin Luther King now. He's an amazing human being. Incredible. But because he was peaceful in his way of doing things. He was relentless. You understand?
Yes.
What else, people? I mean, really, the thing is, a lot of people who like Buddhism have no interest in karma, completely bored by it, think it's completely irrelevant. But if you want to understand the big picture in Buddhism, the big picture, the whole Buddhist worldview, you can't possibly understand it unless you understand karma. That's not possible. But you need to really squeeze your brain to get it clear, because we hear it in a very cliched way. We hear it, we just think it's another variation of punishment and reward. That's why we can't cope with it, you know. And then because we have guilt, when we do the purification practice, a friend of mine who teaches Buddhism, he's full of guilt when he does the regret. He says to himself, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that, and I shouldn't have done that." It's kind of like you beat yourself up. That's just coming from ego. That's completely nonsense. And it's the punishment reward. It's the punishment mode. You know, I'm bad. You're bad. It's so not relevant. So you've got to really think about karma properly. Break it down, you know. And then it's not easy, because when we hear the teachings, I mean, you know, they're talking to the choir. When they teach in their teachings, they're talking to Tibetan people for whom karma has been in their bones for 1,200 years, you know. It's in their culture. It's just part of who they are. But because it's a brand new idea to us, we've got to really think it through, unpack it, put it in our own words to make it clear that it's not anything to do with punishment, because there's no punisher. The view we have of karma, the view we have of punishment and reward is ridiculous. The Buddhist view is more like you go to your doctor and she says you shouldn't smoke. Don't smoke, Robina. And you don't go, how dare you tell me what to do? You say, why not? And then she'll show you a video of cancerous lungs. And you are so grateful to her that she showed you the mess that will come to you if you smoke. But when Lama Zopa sits there and teaches, and you go to the hell realms for 42 eons, if you do this, we just have a panic attack. Instead of being grateful to him for telling us, you know, because we hear it as punishment. We hear it as punishment. It's so ingrained in us. It's so hilarious. That's a bit like thinking your doctor says, don't smoke because I say so. And don't smoke because I will give you cancer. But this is also the interesting point. It's so important to think this. This is the Christian teaching with respect. I asked my priest friend, what defines something as a sin? He said, it is wrong by definition because God said it is wrong. And I'm not criticizing. If you have faith in a creator, you'll live a good life. And you'll want to do God's will. And you know you'll get punished if you don't. But that's how we think of Buddhism. Buddha's not a boss. The doctor's not giving you cancer. The doctor's just wise and will tell you what she's found from her experience is the consequence of cancer. Well, Buddha the same. He's telling us from his own experience the consequence of doing negative actions. It'll only harm you, Robina. And sweetheart, please don't do it for that reason. We can't hear that at all. We're like babies, you know. Do some hard, hear it properly. Because when you start to apply karma, it's liberating because you start taking responsibility. Because it's what we would call compassion for yourself. It's what we would call self-compassion. You want to protect yourself. You know yourself. You would never. I mean, look how we are with health and food and nutrition. We look at every packet, everything that was in. We would never touch that thing if it's got some food in it that's not good for me. That's not fundamental. That's intelligence. So it's the same with actions, virtue and goodness and suffering and negativity. Same approach. Out of self-respect, you would not bear to want to kill or steal or lie. It only harm you. And that's Buddha's emphasis in the first stages. In the first stages of karma, in the Lam Rim, there's no discussion of compassion yet. The Buddha says killing is a natural law. People don't like getting killed. People don't like getting killed. That's why it's wrong. Not because Buddha said, but the why he exhorts us not to do it is because it's going to harm you, Robina. We can't hear this at all. We just hear it as punishment, you know. It's so heavy. So karma is the first step, I tell you. You really hear it properly. It's self-respect. It's taking care of yourself. That's the whole point of renunciation. What renunciation means, you know. To talk about wrong views, using Buddha as our example. What else, people?
Venerable Robina,
Huh?
I have a question.
Hello, sweetheart.
Thank you for your teaching,
Good.
by the way. Back to the 4-year-old little girl.
Yeah.
So
The one who's being kind to or harmed? Which one?
the little girl that was being harmed.
What about the little girl that's being kind to? Why don't you ask the question in that way?
Well, I just,
I think it's a good example. Force yourself to ask it about a happy experience because the law is the same. The logic is the same.
okay.
So force yourself to do that. Give me that little
So
girl.
then the happy little 4-year-old girl,
Yeah.
her karma, that
Yeah.
karma is going to run out.
Is going to want to,
It's going to run out
if she doesn't do more.
if she doesn't do
Your
more of it.
flowers will run, if your veggies will run out if you keep eating them and not planting more. So yes, that little girl's negative karma will run out.
That was my
And the
question.
little girl's virtuous karma will run out. That's why if you know it's due to karma, you sort of, you know, so then go on. So what was the point about that? Say it again.
I just wanted to clarify that the karma will run out, and then unless it's recreated,
And then what?
it will, unless it's recreated.
Unless you do more.
Right.
Unless, I mean, yeah, and that's the tragedy. Because what happens is when we get harmed by somebody and we have anger, you know, that moment of being harmed is already purification. You just purified it. But then what happens is I create more of it by harming you back. And that's how the whole thing keeps going, which is so tragic, isn't it? So we can understand it was karma, if we can, for ourselves, and then work with it and know its purification and that helps us transform it. Then we put atomic bombs under it. Do you understand me? So for the little girl, you just have to love her and take care. You can't give her a lecture, but you take care of her and love her. You understand? And if she's a little Tibetan girl, she'd learn about karma. Yeah, you're absolutely, it's a good point. And that's why every second, you see, that's why we have to understand with karma. We come into this life from the first second of conception, fully, all the garden, we are a garden, and all the seeds are there from past lives. They all were triggered even at the time of death. So the time of past death for that little girl, whoever, any one of us, the first seed that was triggered was the one that caused her to get a human body. That was already triggered before she even stopped breathing. Second, all the karmic seeds that would provide her with her personality, they don't come from her mummy and daddy. They're all her own tendencies. Third, all the karmic seeds that will start, she'll live through her life, that she will experience at the hands of others, good or bad, including being punched in the nose or harmed, or being kind to. And fourth, even the environmental. All of those are there, triggered, ready in that mind of that person before they even died. And then they die, they go to the new mother, and the second they come out of the womb, they start acting out those karmic seeds. So every millisecond of what happens to us, every millisecond of what we think is from past lives. And then everything we do with it now produces the future.
I do. Your point about the little girl being harmed, okay, that's purifying. But then her response, or any of our response when something negative happens to us.
We get angry.
That's
because
cycle,
we have attachment and anger.
and the cycle just keeps
and
going
that's why
on.
it keeps going, and we never end. That's why the tragedy is we never end it, because we always think it's the other thing that's the cause. The main one is to really, it takes a while, but to hear what I said before, the philosophical view that is attachment and that is anger. Because attachment is this assumption, isn't it, that I always must get only the nice things. Do you agree with that?
I do.
So that's, you've got to look at that, because it's completely irrational what it says. It's an assumption that I deserve only happiness. So that when you say I deserve, it implies someone out there has to give it to you. If you look at your garden, it's my point. If you look at your garden and you know it's your garden, you don't say, I deserve flowers and just stand there waiting. That means you think someone's supposed to put flowers in your garden. You don't say that because you know it's your garden. And that's the point about karma. When you own it, your life is your garden. I think it's a great analogy. So then you know every good thing that happens. You don't just greedily eat it up and demand more. You are so blissed out because you realize it's the fruit of your virtue, but you would never waste it. You quickly grow more virtue. And every time a bad one happens, it's the weeds. You go, I must have pulled that one out, and you learn from it. That's why karma is the basis of practice. That's it.
I do. Thank you.
And it means you own your life. I think your life is your garden is a great way to put it. Whereas we feel we're not. We're plonked on this planet by somebody else. That's a very schizophrenic idea for the Buddha. It's very weird. That someone else can make us, invent us, and then throw us on the planet, then we've got to handle the dramas. You know, it's very crazy. The creator idea is very weird for the Buddha. You understand? And equally mother and father. There's always the mother. The father never gets blamed. It's the mother, isn't it? She's the big problem. Mum's fault, isn't it? That's that. This is they say the bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us. Forget not realizing emptiness, but because we don't realize cause and effect. That's conventional wisdom. Huge one. But it's so, even among most Buddhists, you don't hear about it, you don't learn about it. Understand? So we can thank Mama Zopa. We've got to unpack it and put it in terms that we understand, because they're talking to Tibetans who understand it, but we hear it. We hear it. I mean, in a way, I'm joke and say Lama Zopa sounds like the worst 10th century fundamentalist Baptist that you've ever met, isn't it? How he talks, you know, but he laughs about it at the same time. But it's so, the Tibetans are very fundamentalist how they talk. It's just how they are, you know. It's very fascinating. That's why Lama Yeshe was so amazing. He talked like a hippie. He was amazing. Made us feel so much better. You understand? So for me, karma is a huge one. I like to talk about it in down-to-earth words to get past the drama, our misconceptions about it. You know? But actually, when we realize it, it's encouraging. It's empowering. In beginning to understand karma, because anyway, it's a brilliant example of the first level of dependent arising, which is the main way to realize emptiness. It's the example of cause and effect. And already that loosens the grip of self-pity and not fair and poor me. So you become already, just by understanding karma, you become more strong and more independent and more content. And less like a child, like blaming, you know. You understand? It's very powerful. You've got to hear it properly, though. Not just dump it on top of us. You understand? Yeah, Jeff, come on.
Just kind of going back to Karen's.
Go back to closer to the mic. I think it needs you to be right on it.
Closer.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to what Karen was saying,
yeah.
You know, I think like, and it's not a question; it's more like an elaboration. It's quite complex, right? Because we have individual karma and we have collective karma. So the girl.
What are you going to give us a talk, Jeff? Are you?
Sorry.
You want to give us a talk?
No, I want to. I'm just.
You going to ask a question?
I would like for you to elaborate on what I'm trying to explain. Even I don't understand it, but you know, the girl has the karma to receive the punishment. The father has the karma to execute so in this one event, and then Karen has the karma to be compassionate and try to intervene. And then you have the collective karma of all of them coming together at that moment to be there for that event.
Right.
So I think I struggle with, you know, seeing how all of those karmas are happening simultaneously, because there's the girl's karma, the father's karma, Karen's karma, and then the collective karma of all of them together that are happening at this one event. And so it gets very complex for us, like on our mundane level, to see that all this is happening together.
I know, but that's so. If we accept the view, okay, I hear you. Yeah, if we accept the view that karma is a natural law that just does its job, no one runs it. No one runs it. It's like botany. No one has ever run botany. Botanists come along, clever botanists, and they identify what's happening, and then they articulate it And then they write a book about it. They don't make up botany, and they can see how incredibly complex it is. So it's so complex you can't even believe it. Why at that particular time, the temperature of that particular raindrop fell on that particular thing, so the plant went this direction. It's exactly the same. It seems inconceivably sophisticated, and it is. When you realize it's a natural law, that all the components of the universe are just working together and things just happen. But clever people come along and articulate it. So it's the same with karma. It's just a natural law. It just happens out there. No one's running it. It's not accidental. It's not random. It's just, and so of course they say it's even botany would be too hard to explain. The temperature at that moment, this time 1,000 years ago, this happened and that amount of dirt over there and this bit of shade there because the sun went this way. It'd be too difficult to explain it. Exactly the same with karma. That's why we have to learn the simple principles. They all say that in terms of there's manifest phenomena, hidden phenomena, and very hidden phenomena. And karma, emptiness is a hidden phenomena. Karma is a very hidden one because of the subtlety of it. When we think it's a natural law, just like botany, no one's running it, but we can learn to identify it and see it and use those rules in our life. That's the thing about Buddha. He's articulated it. This thing. Do you understand me? So I think as long as you know it's a natural law, then it's there to be understood once your mind's bright enough. And so start with the simple principle. Because it wouldn't happen if the seed weren't there. You see what I'm trying to say? The only way to understand it. So just think of botany. I think of botany that's impossible to explain. You understand the subtlety of it. And the key one is that what it means, dependent arising means all the bits and pieces of the world. That's what science means. That's what they mean. All the bits and pieces that is there doing their thing, all interacting. Same here. All just interacting. So there must be it could be 1,000, if you're a clairvoyant, you could see exactly an event of 17 lives ago when this person, Karen, she might have just been passing and saw two things, and that would be the cause of it. That would be the moment. But when you're clairvoyant, you can see that. Do you understand? The natural law is the point. It's just happening. The biggest one I want to say is I always joke that it's true, but I've never yet had a person ask me why do good things happen. But the law is the same. We always ask about why the weeds are in the garden, why the bad things happen, which shows that anger is a very strong impulsiveness. The unfairness, that it shouldn't happen, it's not fair. That's a very powerful concept in our mind, isn't it? For ourselves and for other people. And then we confuse that with compassion. That's not compassion. Compassion is look at the suffering, and that includes the harmer. And therefore, it's not a sentimental compassion. It's a very wise compassion. And if you can do anything to help people not harm each other, go for it. Absolutely. Then we've got to realize we tend to think because the world is a terrible place. Terrible things happen, and it's naked to us every day because we have so much social media and newspapers and iPads and God knows what. We can see everything all the time. It's unbearable. So we tend to think we suffer because there is suffering. We tend to think we suffer when we see suffering. No, we don't suffer by just merely seeing suffering. We don't suffer if we have compassion. Compassion is a virtue and it doesn't cause suffering. What we've got to understand is it's our attachment, this junkiness that we haven't worked hard enough on. There's a fragile child who just only wants everything to be nice. So if you have that, there you are, you're walking along the street and you've got compassion. You do have compassion. I mean, there's Karen going out there and to Mississippi to help people. Incredible. She had compassion for this suffering, and compassion is incredible. But if she had a lot of attachment, forget her, but anybody, there's also attachment there. This needs things to be nice, and then aversion arises when it doesn't get what it wants. They are why we suffer when we see suffering. They are why we suffer. In Europe, by the time we're a body suffer, when we've given up attachment and aversion, our mind is as solid and powerful and unbelievably powerful, and nothing can disturb us. Nothing can disturb us. That's why I've got such tremendously powerful compassion. And when the more suffering you see, it's grist for your mill to make you stronger and more powerful. That's the bodhisattva. So why we're so fragile is because why we can't cope with much suffering is not because of compassion, it's because of attachment and aversion. This is why the wisdom wing is so important to do first. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. And that's the nuts and bolts of the first and second scopes of the labyrinth. Understanding karma and working on your mind. That's what prepares you for the compassion. It's a big one we miss, I think. What is it? Yeah, good.
Venerable, Maka has a question.
Who has?
Maka, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, Maka, talk to me, sweetheart.
Oh, I just want to thank you for the teachings. And can I give you just a little feedback?
Who? Feedback? What feedback?
I can't quite follow your talking because you talk fast. So for me, it's like listening to music. I know it's going in and it feels uplifting. And
what's your advice? Give me some, and then that's your feedback. Thank you. So what would you suggest? What would you like me to be? How would you like me to be?
Fine. You're just fine. You're doing your thing.
Oh, okay.
What I appreciate is your analogy to botany.
Okay, good. So then, okay, good. Okay, very happy, Michael.
That helps me.
But I think even if I talk slowly, this stuff is so complex, we still can't hear it. We haven't heard it much. The more we're familiar with it, I think. But you are right. I do talk too fast, and I'm sorry, Michael.
It's you, and you're so special. And like I say, it's for me. I'm taking it in like music.
Okay, darling. Thank you so much. No, I know. I keep thinking as I get older, I'll talk slower, but it doesn't seem to happen.
You're talking faster.
I know. I think I'm getting more urgent. I know I'm going to die soon. I have this impulse to fit as much as possible in. I've got to squeeze it all in.
I think so.
Okay, what else, people? I mean, it's not the time yet. We can go if we can finish because I do talk fast. Maybe it's enough. What do you think? Unless there's any more questions. I think so. Let's conclude. Okay, conclude. Freedom to understand. This is exactly Buddha's point. This is Buddha's point. Getting wisdom, getting rid of the delusions, the misconceptions, because they cause us so much pain. They do two things. They cause us pain, and they cause us to not see things as they are, even at the most simple level. That's the key thing that he's making. We can hear that. It's kind of encouraging. That's why Pavanka Rinpoche says, forget about emptiness, but even you don't even know about emptiness, just to say to yourself, just maybe things don't exist in the way they appear to me. It's profound, If we do realize that attachment and aversion are pretty much there for most of us, back and forth all the time throughout the day, I mean, we get frustrated, annoyed, irritated, and upset. They're very popular words. They are mild anger. It's very simple. When you stub your toe, you get upset. The red light, you get upset. Hubby slurps his coffee, you get upset. You never think you're being angry because we think of anger as volatile, and it is, it's extreme level. But aversion, that irritation, upset, annoyed, frustrated, is a mild anger, and it's upset because your attachment didn't get what it wanted. This for me is so profound. So we work on this in every day, several times a day. Grab your mind. So what do you do with it? Instead of, because what aversion, attachment goes running towards something greedily. Aversion has a panic attack and says, go away, can't cope. So what you have to learn to do, is like putting atomic bombs under it, is you greet the problem. It's a red light, Robina. It's cool, honey. You can handle it. You look it in the eye. So that'll calm the aversion down. And then, or if you see things, you're getting angry and upset, you analyze it. And then you break it down. And as soon as you break it down, as soon as you look at it and you break it down, it loosens it. That's what dependent arising is. Because you're seeing it as angry, you just see this big lump of ugliness out there and you can't cope. It's one big solid lump of ugliness. But if you look into it and analyze the details, you're not going to find the ugly thing. So just catch your mind. Maybe it doesn't exist as it appears to me. This is the profound thing that Buddhist psychology is saying. So just catch yourself. You feel that the emotional hunger for the cake. We're all attached to our food, Think about it all the time. You anticipate it, you're waiting for it, you can't wait, and there's the cake on the plate. You just catch yourself. Honey, Robina, it's just your attachment making it look more delicious than it really is. It doesn't exist like your attachment thinks. That puts atomic bombs under your attachment. Try it a few times a day. That's getting wisdom. Chang Chup Sem Cho, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam, Ke Gu Chi, Ke Panam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gong Zu, Peva Sho. So may compassion, may body to grow and grow. And then Gewa Din, Yudu Dag Nama Sange, Drug Yune, Drowa Chikyang Malupa, Dei Sala, Gurpa Sho, all those seeds be planted. As many thoughts as we've had in this last 90 minutes, 80 minutes, is as many seeds we've planted. So we think maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward, working on our minds, developing this person with this work in progress, be so happy. And may Love Rinpoche show his face. We know he's there somewhere, a little Nepali boy somewhere. No news yet, Jeff? No news yet. So may he come soon with his smile, as His Holiness says, beam upon us, and then grow up quickly so we can start teaching us him before we die. Okay? So we can become like him. That's it, people. Thank you, precious ones. Okay. Bye, people on Zoom.